Let me take you to a courtroom where no one dares breathe too loudly, because the most important testimony won't come from the mouth of a witness, but from the growl of a scarred dog. A 5-year-old girl, too traumatized to speak, walks in holding the leash of the only soul she trusts. The man on trial smiles, but not for long. What unfolds next is not just a legal battle. It's a primal reckoning. And when silence starts speaking louder than words, truth has nowhere left to hide. Ready to follow it? Then let's begin. A spring chill hung in the Lancaster air, clinging to the steps of the U.S. District Court like a warning left unspoken. Inside the marble-paneled courtroom, silence pressed against every surface. No one moved. No one dared breathe too loud. Then came the sound. Soft, rhythmic, echoing. Little footsteps on granite. Emily Whitaker, just 5 years old, stepped through the open doors. She wore a charcoal gray sweater dress, her copper-brown curls pulled into a loose ponytail. Her hand clutched a leash tightly. At the other end of it walked Rex, a large German shepherd with a jagged scar running from rib to flank, his movements steady, protective. All eyes turned to them, even the reporters stopped typing. From the defense table, Richard Vale's gray eyes narrowed. He didn't blink. A faint smirk curled at the edge of his mouth. It was too calm, too clean. He saw the girl, and he saw the dog. Something twitched behind his expression. Judge Malcolm Kessler sat straighter on the bench. His sharp gaze moved from the child to the animal, then back again. Something unspoken stirred in him. He'd presided over hundreds of cases, but this one was different. The tension snapped when Michael Troy, the defense attorney, rose. "Your Honor," he began, gesturing toward Rex. "This animal could unfairly influence the jury. His presence is emotional manipulation." Jenna Holloway didn't wait to be asked. "Rex isn't here for sympathy," she said, voice cool but razor-sharp. "He's here for survival." Gasps, murmurs, the gallery cracked into whispers. Kessler tapped the gavel once. This courtroom recognizes every form of voice, including silence. He looked directly at Emily as he said it. The room fell quiet again. Emily turned her head, slowly, deliberately, and locked eyes with Vale. No trembling, no tears, just silence and recognition. Rex's body tensed. He didn't bark. He didn't move. But a low growl rumbled in his chest, primal and instinctual. Vale blinked, ever so slightly, his fingers clenched on the table. And in that instant, something in the room shifted, subtle, but irreversible. Sarah Whitaker sat just outside the courtroom, her fingers clenched around the strap of her purse. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting pale light across her hollowed cheeks. She stared ahead, but her mind was elsewhere. 4 minutes. That's all it had taken. One spring afternoon, Emily had been twirling in their backyard, pink dress flaring in the breeze. Sarah had stepped inside to take a phone call. Just 4 minutes. When she returned, Emily stood frozen, locked in place beside a stranger. Richard Vale was crouched at her level, speaking softly. "I have puppies in my van. Want to meet them?" Before Sarah could scream, Martha Gibson, their retired neighbor, had shouted from across the street, "Hey, step away from that child!" Vale's head snapped around. In a flash, he bolted, van door still open, tires squealing. Emily hadn't cried. She hadn't spoken. She just trembled. Elsewhere, in the gray back halls of the NYPD 3 years earlier, Rex had made a name for himself. He had charged through glass in a hostage rescue, taking down a knife-wielding suspect moments before he could harm a child. Blood stained his coat, the knife carving deep into his side. He never let go. Deemed unfit for continued service, Rex was headed for euthanasia, until Dr. Laura Bennett intervened. She saw something left in him: loyalty, sensitivity, purpose. Months later at Willow Haven Therapy Center, Sarah brought Emily in. The girl hadn't spoken in weeks, hadn't looked anyone in the eye. She stood behind her mother, half hidden. Rex didn't approach. He simply lay there, waiting. Then, something shifted. Emily took a step. Another. Her tiny hand reached out and touched the scarred dog's back. Sarah gasped. No one spoke, but the silence cracked open. A connection was made. Back in the courtroom, Jenna Holloway moved through the case file. Page after page. The room had settled, all eyes on her, until a hand rose. Emily's. She didn't speak, but her fingers made a sharp motion, one taught to her during therapy, a signal. Rex reacted instantly. He stood, growled, eyes locked on Vale. The tension was electric, raw. Vale's head tilted, confused. A flicker of something foreign crossed his face. Not confidence, not control. It was fear. Kessler didn't strike the gavel. He listened, not with his ears, but with instinct. The gavel struck wood. Recess! 15 minutes. But no one moved. The room remained caught in a fragile, electric stillness. Judge Kessler didn't rise. His eyes were fixed not on the lawyers, not on the bench, but on Emily and the dog sitting by her feet. Something ancient, something wordless, had just entered the courtroom, and it wasn't leaving. Rex hadn't shifted. He sat tense, ears pointed, body still, but eyes trained on Richard Vale like a predator that had caught the scent of prey. No bark, no lunge, just warning. In the defense's private room, the walls seemed smaller. Richard Vale slammed his hand down on the table, startling his lawyer. "That dog," he hissed, voice cracking. "He knows. It's not normal. He knows." Sweat beaded along his hairline. His pale face twitched with agitation. The calm, controlled veneer was cracking. Michael Troy tried to speak, but Vale wasn't listening. His jaw clenched. His fingers drummed with rising panic. Back in the prosecutor's office, Jenna Holloway and Agent Monroe hovered over a lab report fresh off the fax machine. Monroe scanned it once, then again, his brows knitting together. "Appalachian Foothills," he muttered. "The soil in the tire treads, it's a match." Jenna leaned over the map, her finger drawing a circle around the Pennsylvania-New York border. "That's where the old cabin sits. 6 months ago, we flagged it, remember? Not enough evidence to enter." "Until now," Monroe said. In the waiting room outside the courtroom, Sarah cradled Emily in her arms. The child said nothing, did nothing, but her grip on Rex's fur never loosened. The dog rested his head gently on her small knees, breathing slow and steady. Then, just barely, one silent tear slid down Emily's cheek. Rex responded by nudging her gently, his nose brushing against her skin like a vow. "I'm here." It wasn't a scene made for headlines, but it was the quiet center of the storm, where instinct met pain and didn't flinch. Thick branches loomed overhead as the FBI convoy wound its way through the Appalachian foothills. Fog kissed the treetops, leaves crunched under boots. Even the birds refused to sing. Rex tugged hard at his leash, his body taut with tension. His nose quivered, ears pinned forward. He wasn't guessing. He knew. Monroe narrowed his eyes. "He's been here before," he said, barely louder than the wind. The cabin came into view, an old structure nestled in shadow. Its wooden siding bowed with time, a single window boarded from the inside. The door hung slightly ajar. Inside, dust, stale air, a rickety table, open cans of food, and fresh footprints. Monroe's instincts surged. He swept his flashlight low, then froze. A thin, unnatural crack traced across the floorboards. "Here," he said, dropping to one knee. A firm knock echoed hollow. "There's something under this." With silent urgency, the team lifted the boards. Below, a narrow staircase disappearing into blackness. Flashlights flickered as the agents descended. The air grew colder, damper. Then, a shape. In the corner of the basement, curled into herself, was a girl. Dirt-streaked, frail, her arms wrapped tightly around her legs, her eyes wide, wild. Stared into the light like it might burn her. "Emma," Monroe whispered. Rex moved first. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He lowered himself slowly, belly to the ground, and crawled toward the girl with infinite gentleness. Emma flinched, then whispered, her voice paper-thin, "Please, don't leave me here again." Monroe's chest tightened. He dropped to his knees, unlocking the cuff on her ankle, lifting her into his arms. She clung to him like she might disappear again. As they climbed the stairs, the light from above touched her tear-streaked face. She didn't speak again. She didn't need to. Rex sat beside her at the top step. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her face buried in his fur. Monroe looked back one last time at the shadowy basement below. "She's the missing piece," he said softly. And just like that, something broken had been found. Again. The air in the courtroom that morning felt heavier than usual, like the silence before a storm. No one spoke as the session resumed. But when the clerk confirmed that Emma Kessler, the rescued girl, was the niece of Judge Malcolm Kessler, something shifted. The courtroom was no longer just a stage for law. It had become personal. Kessler's face remained composed, his voice steady, but the slight tremble in his hand on the bench betrayed the storm inside him. He was no longer just a judge. He was an uncle. Jenna Holloway stood center floor, her voice calm, every word weighted with restrained fire. "This is the cabin," she said, clicking the projector. A map, a photo, a damp, low-ceilinged basement, a chain on a child's ankle. Emma Kessler spent 180 days underground. This man parked his car on soil that matched the one beneath her feet. Murmurs swept the jury box. One juror covered her mouth, another stared down, fists clenched. At the defense table, Richard Vale's hands began to shake. A bead of sweat slid down his temple. Then Rex moved. Without a sound, the German Shepherd stood and took slow, deliberate steps toward Vale. No command, no leash tug, just instinct. Each paw step echoed like judgment. He stopped 2 feet from the defendant, letting out a low, throaty growl. Not a threat. A truth. They locked eyes with the dog, and broke. He rasped, voice barely audible. "I want to change my plea." A hush fell across the courtroom. Not a gasp, not a single clap, just breath held and finally released. Jenna stood still, her gaze pinned to Vale like a blade that didn't need to be drawn. Kessler didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Vale was led out in handcuffs. He didn't resist. No one cheered, but everyone watched. Emma sat beside her mother, watching him go. Her expression wasn't fearful, it was unflinching. Justice had arrived, not like thunder, but like the slow, certain rising of the sun. The sentencing was swift. Life in prison without parole. No appeals. No leniency. The gavel came down, not as a blow, but as a quiet closure. Jenna Holloway remained at her table long after the courtroom emptied. Her hand trembled slightly, not from exhaustion, but from release. It was done. In the back row, Agent Monroe sat with arms crossed, eyes on the empty stand. A soldier at rest. One final case. One final child found. Sarah Whitaker held Emily's hand, not tightly but gently. Her grip wasn't to shield her daughter anymore. It was to walk beside her. Outside, the ripple continued. Justice Wire opened with Layla Estrada's calm voice over a still image of Rex and Emily. Today, silence found a voice, and justice was heard. Not through words, but through truth. No dramatic headlines, no fiery rhetoric, just the image of a child and a dog and the light that followed them out of the dark. In a classroom at the University of Pennsylvania, a law student wrote across the blackboard, "Justice isn't the loudest voice in the room. It's the clearest truth." And beneath it, someone added in smaller chalk, "Sometimes it barks." That afternoon, Emily walked down the courthouse steps with Rex at her side. No cameras, no reporters, just her and the weightless quiet after a long storm. Sarah followed, but not to lead, to witness. Emily paused at the edge of the courtyard, crouched beside Rex, and whispered into his ear for the very first time. "Thank you." Rex didn't bark. He didn't move. He just leaned into her shoulder, tail swaying gently. The circle was complete. From the far side of the square, had you turned to look, you'd have seen only a small girl and a scarred dog. No fanfare, no medals, no spotlight. But for those who understood, it was the clearest, most profound kind of justice there is. Justice doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it walks in quietly, on small feet and 4 paws, and sits in silence until the world is finally ready to listen. This story reminds us that truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. It lives in instinct, in courage, and in the unspoken moments that carry the weight of everything left unsaid. And when the darkness tries to hide, it's not always law or logic that exposes it, but something much more human and more honest. If this story moved you, made you feel something deep, or reminded you what justice should look like, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that dares to speak the truth, even in silence. Thank you for watching.